we're going to talk to you about algorithmic management. And as you know, organizations are more and more relying on algorithmic management tools, and their adoption are seen in both non-traditional work settings like the gig economy that we hear a lot about, but also in more traditional work settings. And what we know from the literature review is that we're more seeing conditional use of AI and algorithmic management, because the full automated algorithmic management is rare if we follow Woods. And we also know that the AM, or algorithmic management, reconfigures the social relations at work in ways that extend organizational control mechanism. And we here mobilize the algorithmic control concept proposed by Kellogg and colleagues in 2020. And one way that we can also look at this transformation is the extraction and the codification of tacit knowledge that is made visible to managers. So one of the questions in the literature is about this transformation of visibility of the labor process and workers' agency and capacity to shape, resist, negotiate, and contest mechanism of controls. In our piece, we used the vignette approach. That is a way to really present data with long narratives that are taken out of 3 case studies that we've done. And the cases are very different in terms of institutions, culture, geographic locations. But then we observe an intensification of management control, notably through the codification of knowledge and the standardization of workers' knowledge. Okay, so this is a bit of our theoretical assumptions taken from the labor process, and I'll just go right to the concept of visibility and invisibility. And we used Crane and colleague, who are proposing that the invisibility or visibility is a tool of power where organizational choices around what or who is visible or invisible shape whether work is valued or devalued. So keeping work invisible to direct supervisors can provide workers greater discretion by using shadow systems or workarounds that enables the workers more control and autonomy. So this notion of autonomy was also keen on this in our thinking. So again, the 3 dimensions that we used regarding organizational control based on Edwards and Kellogg are the direction, evaluation, and the discipline. And in our methodology, we use, as I said, the vignette approach, which is a data display, plausible, vivid, and authentic insights into the life world of the participants in the field. And we've done the analysis doing theoretical coding of parts of the labor process, again, on the direction, evaluation, and discipline, and coupled with the notion of visibility and invisibility. So today we will present you 2 cases: the data processing center worker in rural India, and this was done by Kai here, the collection of data, and it's a combination of 96 survey responses and 14 semi-structured interviews conducted by Kai, and we also used the data collected by Cassandra, myself, and Christian in the aerospace industry with machinists in Montreal with semi-structured interviews, approximately 100 with managers, union reps, also reps from other intermediary organizations and focus groups with workers. So now the findings and the results.
Yeah, so initially, yes, we had 3 cases. We're going to present 2, partially because we thought we were going to be a bit shorter on time, but we actually have more time, so just bear with us. So on the second case, this vignette, we look at the work experiences of a female data processing analyst in Andhra Pradesh in rural India. And in this particular case, in our analysis of power dynamics, it shows that algorithmic management was mainly being shown through the area of direction of work. So when we go through the three different dimensions of direction, evaluation, and discipline, what this looks like in practice is the workers were asked to log on to platforms such as Amazon Mechanical Turk or Facebook, and then use that platform, and then the platforms itself and the algorithms behind them direct the work organization, controlling the pace, the tasks, and how it's going to be performed. And on evaluation, what we found is in this particular workplace, there was intense work monitoring where we have line managers, CCTVs. There were also various types of surveillance and recording. And importantly, there was a team-based peer-to-peer evaluation that will take place frequently on testing the accuracy and controlling the quality of the work. And lastly, we also saw there was discipline where because of the particular work culture and the practices being done, workers can actually be asked to resign, and then at the discretion of the management as a way to avoid these formal administrative processes. And what we have found here is workers in the entire labor process of data labeling, annotations, so the back end of a lot of artificial intelligence is actually quite invisible. And then some of this work have been shown by Cherry 2016. And what this means is in algorithmic control, it actually reinforces existing forms of organizational control in this case. And we also saw that line managers, because of this, their role had become more central and more visible because now they have more ways to monitor and also control the labor process. And then in the next case, we have the aerospace example in Montreal. So here, the power dynamics that we found was, we found algorithmic management was exhibited in the areas of direction and evaluation of work. So under direction, algorithmic management captures and sequence the nature of each task, making each of the activities of the machinist more visible, but as well as the task of the managers as well. On evaluation, this one was also quite interesting, where workers' performance data was also made more visible for everyone to see that were displayed right on the factory floor. And this is being used to benchmark worker performance and also for the usage of performance management. And on discipline, and we thought this one was quite interesting, where it was actually being moderated, where because of the collective agreements and the technology agreements that were put in place, the role of algorithmic management's kind of affordance in discipline was limited. And from this case, what we saw was the machinists' tacit knowledge and their situational knowledge of the place was, and the work that they do was actually devalued, where many of them do feel dehumanized. And we also find for the managers, their role seemed to be partially intermediated, disintermediated as well, where they are more and more just following what's on the tablet. So there's a bit of the relationship has been severed. So bring these together. So we wanted to kind of put these two side by side. And of course, like when we have three cases, this is what it looks like, but let's go back to the two. So here, what we have done is for the case that's in the data center in Pradesh, and then also the aerospace case in Montreal, we wanted to see how has power and visibility been shifted by the use of algorithmic control through the areas of direction, evaluation, and discipline. So in the Andhra Pradesh case, as we described, it seems like it was mainly in the area of direction and evaluation. However, there seem to be more nuance when we look at evaluation, where workers themselves are kind of blinded on who is actually evaluating them. So this can be the line managers themselves, their peers, or it can actually be the algorithms as well. So this type of invisibility of who's doing this role is quite interesting. Then we have discipline in the Andhra Pradesh case, where the line managers, their role is actually being made more visible, but also algorithms are not really there to kind of intermediate this process, because in the workplace, the culture and the practice is such that workers don't really have that much power to say if they can, remain at work or being asked to resign. In the aerospace case, what is interesting here, I think, is at the very end, the algorithmic disciplinary function, right, is very limited because of the labor institutions of collective agreement and trade unions. But when we go to the roles of direction and evaluation, we do see, it appears that workers' kind of labor process in terms of how things are being directed and evaluated are becoming more visible, right? Both to the management, but also to other workers for competition and for benchmarking. At the same time, we saw that managers' roles were also shifting because they seem to be partially disintermediated as well. And then just for a bit of a comparison for the case that we did not present, which was the Uber driver in San Francisco. Here we saw that algorithm management definitely did kind of have a more pertinent role in all three dimensions. So why does this matter? So going back to what Julie shared, yes. So it seems like algorithm management does have a role in the codification of the tasks and knowledge of workers. And this has been made the task and knowledge and the labor process of workers have been made more visible. And then what this also means is the discretion of workers have been reduced due to the routinization and the codification of what that looks like. Then another finding that we saw was, because of this, this increased visibility in some sorts actually enhances the organizational control, managerial control in some of the cases. That also shows the reconfiguration of this power dynamics. And what this means for workers and worker agency, it appears that there's a reduction in that, and workers' ability to resist, shape, and negotiate. And lastly, this also raised important questions, and I think this is like nicely tied to the previous parts on how do workers actually increase their capacity, and what are the resources that's required, or the institutions, right? Because we also have three different cases with different institutions to actually shape, resist, and negotiate for better work. Yeah, with that, we've finished. Thank you.
Yeah, question over here.
Yes, referring to your last slide, I have two
You see this one?
Could it be that standardization can be an interest of workers? I asked the question because visibility and organization is the process can also be benefits to the benefit of workers. I specifically I'm looking on this paper. So I specifically refer to the first case from which your question came, where it's actually in the benefit and in the interest of workers to have more standardization, more systematic use of tacit knowledge even. Yeah, so everyone is benefiting.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question because this is.
Could you repeat the question?
yeah,
Sorry for the
sorry.
Zoom.
Okay,
audience.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question was about the standardization of work processes, if that can be of any interest for workers. Okay, so then I think it's an interesting question in a way, because what we found in our cases is that this process of standardization is really seen by workers as preventing them from being competent, because they relied a lot on their tacit knowledge. And what they told us is that we know how to do the job. So there's a kind of a distinction between how work was organized and directed by management and the way that they were producing their own work. And they felt that they were losing control over the production of quality because they were denied their tacit knowledge. But then again, maybe there's another question related to that, is that maybe if there was a better connection between management and the workers in this production of the norms, maybe then you would have your case in point.
I would exactly emphasize that there are two conditions for good standardization. First, employees should be involved in developing the standardized rules
Early in the process, yeah.
Indeed, that they can follow good standardized rules, following or based on their basic knowledge. First, and secondly, I think it's also important that workers should remain able to deviate from standards. If they see a situation or interpret the situation based on their basic knowledge, that the standardized rule of the procedure should not be used in this case, but should be able to be used they want.
To keep a judgment, capacity to judge.
Okay. Can I take chair's prerogative here?
You may have.
In the case of the union in Montreal, is there any examples where they went beyond negotiating how the algorithms were used to actually negotiating the formulas that went into that? Because there's a case in Italy, the Nuovo Pignone plant for General Electric, where the CGIL union spent 4 years bargaining for the right. Because the problem is that if you bargain after the fact, then so many things are already decided, right? And so the algorithm is not neutral. And so they bargained and they got people in, hired people in who knew the technical aspect, so they could bargain intelligently about that. So I'm curious whether they're going into that stage or it's after that.
For the moment, the data we have is that the union didn't get involved early on.
Yeah.
But this is a discussion that is happening right now. And I think also, and this is about this union, but also other unions, I think there's a movement towards thinking about how to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe, unions need to have a new collaboration with universities to train themselves, to get new resources, to be able to shape in advance the technology. But in this case, the answer is no. Yeah.
Can I quickly
Yes, of
have a
course.
bit of a response? So in a case in Andhra Pradesh, and we go back to standardization, and I think it's great that in this session, we try to see the object of algorithmic management or AI and then turn it into a process, right? But when we begin to look at it as a process, some of these different dimensions begin to come up. So when it comes to the actual data, right, that is, and then it's intensely controlled, like the workers themselves often will say, we don't know why we're labeling certain things, right? They may have the perceptual understanding of what a roadside is, but the contextual and the meaning, and then you can have other dimensions that add to this. So there is an aspect where, yes, it can be helpful, but also when you go into the ontology and the epistemic understanding of why something is being labeled as such, and how, so that's at the bottom end, and how that actually eventually translate into in a work process, right? That in itself, I think there's something that I would like to call, and it's actually being named technical debts, right? Where because of the myths, as what Roman was saying, and the lack of understanding, and I think it's part of the opacity is actually deliberate, the abstraction hides the extractive processes, right? And then, but when you begin to go into this technical debt, actually also translate into intellectual debt. We actually don't really know some of these inner workings. And then, but these other operational dimensions have a lot to say. So we also want to display this through the 3 cases as well. It's like, oh, I would leave it at that. Yeah,